Well, I'm really happy to introduce Samir Akash today because I've admired his work for a long time, and he's going to talk about Ibn Arabi's tomb and the spiritual legacy in Damascus. And Samir is Professor of Architecture at the Adelaide University, Australia, and he has a unique mix of expertise. Amongst them is history and theory of architecture, Islamic art, the intellectual history of Arab, Islamic, and Ottoman traditions in the early modern period, the urban history of Middle Eastern cities, in particular Damascus, and Islamic cosmology, philosophy, and mysticism. Samir is also the founding director of the Center for Asian and Middle Eastern Architecture. It addresses the demand for new cross-cultural understanding of architecture. Last year, Samir was elected Fellow of the Australian Academy of the Humanities. Congratulations, Samir. He's written many books and articles, including books on the Istanbul Observatory, the cultural history of Ottoman Damascus, Sufi scholars, Islam and the Enlightenment, cross-cultural thinking in architecture, and also geography, and even the cultural history of coffee. I want to draw particular attention to one of his books that's called Cosmology and Architecture in Pre-Modern Islam. The book is very fascinating for me because it's an interdisciplinary study that shows the connection between architecture, cosmology, and mysticism. It has many references to mystical texts and a special focus on the works of Ibn Arabi. There was a Turkish translation released in February this year. Two different Persian editions were published in 2018 and 2015, and there's an Arabic edition currently underway. In this very original work, Samir provides important insights into Islamic culture, the history of architecture, the relationship between art and religion, and creativity and spirituality. And I'd like to just quote a little passage from the introduction, which I read many years ago and I've never forgotten. Quote, "When I was a little boy, I used to love the snowfall in Damascus. Raised on a couch placed under the kitchen's window, I used to stand up and motionless, gazing at the snowflakes silently and gracefully falling down. In a magical moment, as I concentrated hard on the falling motion, the situation switched. The snowflakes became still and I began to rise. The ascension felt endless, as if I was silently floating in an infinite space. I was curious to know what lies beyond the sky. I had a suppressed desire to take a look at God's wondrous land. I wanted to see where God lives. I knew my gazing trick would never take me there, but I was sure that where God lives was a different world." End of quote. Samir, you were obviously a curious little boy with a strong desire to know where God lives. We look forward to hearing from you today what you have discovered since then. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Patricia. This is really wonderful. I mean, the memory of that experience is so vivid in my mind, and reminding me of it was so wonderful. Thanks for that. And I'd like to thank also Aydogan for his pioneering work in Australia, for setting up the Ibn Arabi Initiative at Monash University, and for taking the leadership in actually bringing all Ibn Arabi's admirers and lovers and researchers to come and contribute to Adelaide. I've been here now for over 30 years, and this is the first time that I sort of feel at home a little bit. I can talk about Ibn Arabi within an Australian context rather than being elsewhere. So thanks, Aydogan. I really appreciate your invitations and all the hard work that you have done. Let me start by sharing the screen and say a few words about my presentation. Let me try to get that right. All right. I hope, let me just turn that. I hope you can see this. Let me know when you do. Terrific. All right. Well, I've chosen to speak about Ibn Arabi's tomb and spiritual legacy in Damascus. Normally, I turn my focus into Ibn Arabi's teachings, which is the most interesting aspect of him. That's why I was attracted to his work in the first place, and always sort of share my insight, my understanding of his texts in my talks. But today I wanted to do something a bit different. I wanted to talk about the social context of Ibn Arabi's, and particularly his decision to settle in Damascus. I mean, out of all the places that he traveled, eventually he made a decision to settle in Damascus. And I thought probably, this time would be good to play my professions as an architect and speak about architecture rather than about his teaching. So that is where the drive has come from. So I will start with talking about what I wanted to present. Hopefully I'll try to summarize it and make it quite quick within the 40 minutes that I was given. I want to talk about Ibn Arabi's connection to Damascus. Now, mostly people tend to sort of focus on his teaching because his teaching is so inspiring, and tend to be sort of without a context, because the teaching could actually be relating to anywhere. I wanted to try to sort of look at his placement or connection to Damascus and see whether that give us some insight into why he chose that city and what the consequences of that decision. So I will be focusing on three clusters of questions. Question concerning Damascus, questions concerning his tomb, and question concerning his legacy. And I refer here to spiritual legacy. Under the first cluster, I'm asking three questions. Why did Ibn Arabi choose to settle in Damascus? Now, this is quite an intriguing question, even though that a lot of people, a lot of scholars ask that question. We don't really know exactly why did he make that decision. He could have stayed in Cairo. He could have stayed anywhere else. He could have stayed in Aleppo. He could have stayed in Konya. At least in Konya and Aleppo, he had his closest disciples, and at least some of the sources also say that he was married in Konya. So, but no, he decided to stay in Damascus. So was Damascus hospitable to Sufism? I mean, was it Damascus his choice because he found that Damascus has particular support for Sufism, so he could feel comfortable? Or was his choice based on a divine disclosure? Now, this is going to take me to a particular work of his, highly controversial. Most scholars actually don't like to talk about, but I decided to kind of dig into it. I've done a bit of work on it, actually not a lot of work on it, and I thought I'll share my insight with you. So that's quite an intriguing questions that relate to the second clusters. Why did Sultan Selim constructed his tomb? Now, once we know the itinerary of Sultan Selim's voyage into Damascus, or actually conquering of Damascus, and what he did, that raises quite a lot of questions. So that would be one that is related to the last question, was this choice based on Ibn Arabi's a particular spiritual experience or divine disclosure? And here is the work that I would like to dwell on, which is called الشجرة النعمانية, the tree of Nu'man, الشجرة النعمانية في الدولة العثمانية, which is the tree of Nu'man concerning the Ottoman state. Now, this is eschatological treatise, very enigmatic, is a prophetic. It has it has a lot of projections and prophecies based on astrological data and astronomical informations, and most scholars think that it has been fabricated. But anyway, we will look at this because this is so important for the questions of why did Ibn Arabi settle in Damascus. And then we would look at has his tomb enhanced the Sufi profile of Damascus. He moved into Damascus when he was 59 years of age. I think he got in 1221. 1221 makes it exactly 800 years from this year. That's quite a long time. Did his presence, the tomb that Sultan Selim constructed, actually made a difference to the city? Did it raise the profile of Sufism in the city? And then we'll go into the question concerning his legacy. If we ask what was Ibn Arabi's spiritual legacy in Damascus, I think we'll find a lot of difficulties to try to sort of quantify that there is something significant that has sort of emerged from his choice and settlement in Damascus. One particular person that I would like to, or a Sufi I'd like to focus on is Sheikh Abdul Ghani Nabulsi. And I'm asking questions, why did it take 500 years for an-Nabulsi to emerge? An-Nabulsi is generally presented among his followers. An-Nabulsi is a figure from the 17th, 18th century. And he's regularly presented or perceived among his followers as the second coming of Ibn Arabi, as the reincarnation, if you like, of Ibn Arabi's in Damascus. But why did it take 500 years for him to emerge? What does that tell us about the really the culture, the religious culture in Damascus? And then, who is an-Nabulsi anyway? And why is he so special? So I'm hoping that I can sort of cover all those. I've got to speed up a little bit because I think I've got a lot of material to cover. So I'll start with Ibn Arabi's connection to Damascus with the questions, why did he make the choice? This is a beautiful painting by 17th century European traveler. We don't know who, but it shows sort of the center of the city, which is the Great Umayyad Mosque, and the houses around it, and the garden. The best reference to get a sense of what Damascus looks like around the time when Ibn Arabi was there was Ibn Jubayr. And Ibn Jubayr wrote fascinating descriptions of the city. He says, as for Damascus, she is the paradise of the East, the horizon from which its dazzling light arises. The young bride among the cities whose veils we have lifted. She is adorned with plants whose flowers are full of fragrance, and she rises up under the silky finery of her gardens. The soil is so sick of the abundance of her water, that it longs to be thirsty. I thought that was very interesting, actually. Yeah. Descriptions. Orchid form a circle around her, similar to the halo surrounding the moon. They hug her like the calyx hugs the flower. And then, how right they were those who have said about her, if paradise is on earth, then it is certainly Damascus. And if it is in heaven, then this city vies with its glory and equals beauty. So that's quite an impressive description of what Damascus is like. Now, but does this offer an insight into why Ibn Arabi decided to settle in the city? It has been beautiful, described regularly by visitors as being a beautiful city, but let's remember that actually he came from Spain, he came from Andalusia, and Andalusia was just equally beautiful. So we don't know, but it is important to know what the city is like at the time when he moved in. We need to remember also that Damascus holds imaginative and cultural affinity with Umayyad Spain. Now this has really been constructed through discourses and literature. Anyone who actually read Ibn al-Khatib's book, Al-Ihata fi Akhbar Gharnata, it is all about how the cities in Spain were constructed in the image of Damascus and in the image of Bilad al-Sham. So there's a strong connection. The Islamic Spain, we know that remain Umayyad, and the Umayyad culture have that kind of resonance, and they always long to that connection with Bilad al-Sham. We know that a lot of people from Morocco and the western part of the Islamic world and Spain have come and settled in Damascus, and we know that Ibn Arabi had a lot of connection with those families that's there. So that could actually be one of the reasons why he also decided to settle there. Now, one other things about Damascus is the whole discourse that called Fada'il al-Sham, or virtue of Sham. That's the all the sacred quality of the land there. And there's so many prophetic traditions that describe the exclusive quality of the of Sham. Sham is actually sort of referred to the Levant, in general, and also to Damascus. There is one in particular which actually says that it is the most refined spot on earth, God's most refined spot on earth, and in it, the most refined of his people that lives in there. And also it's been referred to as the refuge of the prophet. So, but there's so many others, and a whole discourse about the sacred nature of the city. And that adds also to the where sort of the profile of the city, whether that provided an attractive point for Ibn Arabi. Now, let's remember also that the city, there are two cities of particular importance for Islam, and particularly for the Hajj caravan, is Cairo and Damascus, because they were the congregation points where all travelers who want to go to Mecca for the Hajj, for the pilgrimage, they have to congregate. The one that comes from Western Africa, they go all the way to Cairo, and the one that comes from north, from Turkey, and from the east, Iraq, and all the others, they come all to Damascus, and the caravan goes all the way down on both sides, actually, of the Red Sea until they hit a particular point where the caravan that comes going down from Cairo cross the Red Seas, and they meet and go to Medina and then to Mecca. So just if you think about this, the whole cycle of the cultural cycle of the city is based on this. And one of the advantages of this is that so many prominent scholars come and meet yearly in Damascus to follow the caravan, whether it's from north or whether from the east, and so it is. And this takes normally about sort of 6 months for the caravan to go and come back. So, and by the time the caravan comes back, they'll have to start preparing for the next caravan, which is the following year. So there was a constant a presence of very interesting people, and kind of cosmopolitan in a way, because along the way, those people, when they travel, they establish sort of mobile school and universities where they discuss and write, and so it's not like now you hop on the plane and a couple of hours you'll be in another place. It would take about 3 months to get to the other. It's all walking, you see. So this is also provide another point of attraction, which I thought would have sort of attracted Ibn Arabi to stay in Damascus. So the question is, was Damascus then hospitable to Sufism, considering all this? Let's have a look. He moved to Damascus when it was under the Ayyubid rule. The Ayyubid rule were starting to disintegrate. At his time, it was fine. It was relatively stable. But the Ayyubid really weren't particularly known for their love of Sufism. Right? Let's not forget As-Suhrawardi al-Maqtul. As-Suhrawardi, Shihab ad-Din As-Suhrawardi, who died in 1191, a famous followers of or establisher actually of the Illuminist school, Al-Madrasa al-Ishraqiyya. He was known as Maqtul, which means executed, because he was executed in Aleppo on the order of Salah ad-Din, which is the head of the Ayyubid. I think the king, his son there, I think, can't remember, probably Az-Zahir, didn't know what to do with this guy who was causing so much trouble. So he wrote to his dad, and his dad said, "Come on, get rid of him." So so they weren't known that they love Sufis, all right, or they love mystics, particularly with really strong and controversial ideas. Let's look also at the visit of Ibn Battuta to Damascus. Now we looked at Ibn Jubayr. Ibn Jubayr actually came from Spain, and also Ibn Battuta came from Spain. They came to Damascus. The difference between them is that Ibn Battuta came when Ibn Taymiyyah was in Damascus. Remember, Ibn Taymiyyah is Ibn Arabi's strongest and strongest foe. He was the guy who actually, created the whole anti-Sufi sentiments in the Islamic world. Now, Taqiyuddin also wasn't from Damascus. He came and settled in Damascus. Ibn Battuta think that this guy has got a loose screw in his head. So that's what he said, Hikayat al-Faqih dil-Lawtha. That means he's got a loose screw in his head. So you can see here is that, he talks about all these sciences, but he has something in his head. He's not really, this guy cannot be sort of trusted. That's story about Ibn Taymiyyah. But then he goes on and say, وَكَانَ أَهْلُ دِمَشْقِ يُعَظِّمُونَهُ أَشَدَّ التَّعْظِيمِ. That means the people of Damascus used to venerate him greatly, the most, and probably the utmost veneration he used to get it in there. So that immediately tells us that there is, and if there is a culture that support Ibn Taymiyyah, that means that culture would be against Sufism. There is no doubt about this. This is straight black and white. So let's go down the text, which Ibn Battuta's text, and here he explains, he was there in prison, he was in the mosque when Ibn Taymiyyah was giving a sermon, and he was explaining a verse in the Quran where it says that God's descend to the lower heaven, and he wanted to explain how this happens. So he stepped down one step on the pulpit and said, that's how it goes when God descends. So there was a Maliki jurist, and Maliki jurists must have come from the West because Damascus and Syria are all Shafi'i, and all the Malikis comes from the western part of the Islamic world. He opposed, and he actually said that this is, he was kind of criticizing strongly. So everyone in the mosque went up in arms and start bashing the guy. All right, they bashed him. The text says that they start bashing him with their hands and with their shoes, because he just criticized Ibn Taymiyyah. And the funny thing is that his headgear fell off, and they suddenly realized that he's actually wearing a silk sort of cap on his head, and men shouldn't actually be wearing silk. So they made a big issue out of it. So you can actually see that people of Damascus weren't particularly keen on Sufis, and if they can defend just Ibn Taymiyyah's sort of interpretation, which is kind of weird interpretation, to that extent, that will give us really an idea of what kind of environment that Ibn Arabi was living in. All right, in summary, let's look at, with all the facts that we have, we could actually say that Damascus were relatively politically stable under the Ayyubid rule. There was a lot of fighting among the Salahuddin siblings, and but they used to actually sort out things outside the city, and inside the city there was some stable life. What is interesting, the sources tell us that Ibn Arabi maintained a stronger relationship with the jurists than the Sufis. So he had maintained really amicable relationship with the fuqaha, who used to be the main trouble actually for the Sufis. But somehow he was highly respected, which came as a surprise to me, and he maintained good relationship with them. Now, one of the reasons why I would imagine that he received a strong support from Bani Zaki. Bani Zaki were a very influential family in Damascus, Ayyubid Damascus. They were all judges, high judges, and had a great political clout in the cities, and they were the one, they were the family who actually supported him, and they kind of embraced him. And I think probably this is one of the reasons why he decided to stay in Damascus rather than, for example, going to Aleppo, where his very close disciple Ibn Sawdakin was there. So and he was buried in their cemetery. So that would I would imagine played a stronger role in this, swinging his decision to stay in Damascus. And then we know for a fact that he lived a comfortable life with generous financial support, and he stayed near Bab al-Faradis, which is an area in the city. And he had actually received daily general allowances where he used to, so he didn't work. He had a group of students. He didn't work. He used to get the money, spend what he needs, and distribute the rest to all the poor people. So this is the area. If you want to know where Bab al-Faradis is, this map shows the Great Umayyad Mosque right in the center, or towards the center, and to the north is what is known as Bab al-Amara, and also known as the Bab al-Faradis. So this is where the area that he lived in. So it is on the north. This is Bab al-Faradis from inside and from outside. So it still exists. 800 years on from Ibn Arabi, still exists. He was close to this gate. There was a madrasa, a school called the School of Al-Rawahiyya. And he was very close to that, which is near there. We don't know. The school is actually, I think, disappeared. I couldn't actually trace the school. But nonetheless, this is traces of the city where he might actually have lived. And I think evidence shows that he lived near that area. All right, so let's move on now to what a choice based on divine disclosure. Now here we get into trouble, and let me refer to particular work, which is, as I said, is Shajar al-Nu'maniyya fi Dawla al-Uthmaniyya, the tree of Nu'man concerning the Ottoman states. And in that text, which is, as I said, a highly controversial text, we don't know whether actually he wrote it, when it was written, and when it was written. But nonetheless, is highly important, and most of the scholars that studied Ibn Arabi decided not to touch that work. For example, Osman Yuhya, in his whole comprehensive listing of the work, never mentions this, even though he mentions, obscure work, and he said these are attributed to Ibn Arabi. He never mentioned that word. That, according to my survey of his work, completely neglected. And I mean, it's not neglected. They know that it exists, but they just don't know what to do with it. So in that text, he makes a lot of sort of prophecies based on symbolic issues, and like interpretations of certain numbers and figures, and astronomical conjunction of planets and various things. And he says this, I'm saying it in Arabic here, وسبب الإشارة ما كشفه الحق لنا بطريقة التعريف الإلهي. Now it's interesting, التعريف الإلهي is not disclosure, is a particular direct informations from God that his death is going to be in Damascus. So دمشق الشام المنعوتة بجلقة. So he was saying that he knows that he was going to die in Damascus. Now, when was that sort of composed? Was it sort of when he was in Damascus? Was it sort of before he comes to the Damascus? Did he come to Damascus because he knew that he's going to die in Damascus? We really don't know, but this work is highly significant. So let me just sort of give you an idea about this work, which I don't know how many of you have sort of come across it, but it has a very wide presence. So this is al-Matn al-Shajar al-Nu'man. This is the copy of the I would say probably the original source. This is a copy that I obtained from Al-Zahiriyya library. So that's the title in here, and because it is the Matn, not the commentaries, and this is an interesting one. And what is most interesting about it, but I got it from the Zahiriyya library, but the listing of Al-Zahiriyya library does not actually include this book. I don't know why they've just completely sort of overlooked it, or just a slippage, or don't want to mention it. But in Al-Zahiriyya library, there are commentaries. So let's look at the commentaries. We've got the first commentary is Ahmad al-Buni, who died 1225. There's one copy in the Al-Zahiriyya library. The second commentary was Sadr al-Din al-Qunawi. and this is the most popular commentary on this. There's 7 copies in the Zahiriya library. And then the third one, which is quite weird, in fact, is by Salah ad-Din al-Safadi. Salah ad-Din al-Safadi wasn't particularly sort of interested in Sufism, but he was interested in that, the prophecies that was contained. There's 5 copies in there. And if you search the libraries around the Islamic world, you would, it is abundant in tens, probably, you might get actually even hundreds of copies around the Islamic world. So the text is well known. Now the question is, if it is fabricated, when it was fabricated, who fabricated this? Now, why this book, this particular text is important, and why is it important for his tomb? Let's have a look. So now we're going to move into the second cluster, that Ibn Arabi's connection to Damascus, the question concerning his tomb. Now, why did Sultan Salim construct his tomb, and did Ibn Arabi write at the tree of Nu'man, or the Shajar al-Nu'maniyya, and has his tomb enhanced the profile? Let's focus on the first two. The main important prophecy in that text, which is Shajar al-Nu'maniyya, it says here in Arabic, is that I mean, if this is in symbolic language, if the letter S, which is seen in Arabic, enters the letter Sheen, which is Sh in English, then the grave of Ibn Arabi will be resurrected. And he explained this by saying, the letter Sin referred to Sultan Salim, and letter Sheen refers to Sham, which is Damascus. So he was predicting that once Sultan Salim entered Damascus, his tomb will be constructed, and that is in that in that text. Now we go on and read again. He predicts. I'm not going to read this. I will sort of give you the gist of it in English. He said that he knows that he's going to die in Damascus, and his grave is going to disappear for a while, and then someone from Constantinople, the great Constantinople, is going to come to Damascus. His first letter, the first letter of his name is Sin, from the Ottomans, from Al Osman, and he is the one who's going to resurrect our grave and construct our tomb. Now that couldn't be sort of more direct than that. Now, all right, so that's one level of it. Let's look at the second level in that particular text. That the second level of it is the way that the text sanctioned the takeover of the Arab world by the Ottomans. So here he says that Wahaz al-Qaim, he refers to Sultan Salim, it was it kind of sanctioned by the divine order and the permissions of the Prophet, and Rida Rijal al-Waqt, and then all those religious leaders, he referred to them Rijal al-Waqt and Arbab al-Rutab. So they are all those people who knows, who knows the kind of the hidden wisdom from the appearance of the Turks at that time, and knowing that this is really a change in government or in empires that is sanctioned by God and the prophets. And then he says he's going to take over the entire Arab world, right up to Morocco and to the Yemen, and he's going to take over Iraq. And here is an interesting one. He's يخدم الحرفين الشريفين. That he's going to serve the two most sacred sanctuaries of Islam, which is Mecca and Medina. خدمة تامة, perfectly. And his empire is going to stay until at a certain time. So he sort of gives the detail, but here it's quite different to him just the predicting that the Ottomans are going to resurrect his tomb. He is actually giving sanction to them and say, look, this is really a change, because they are taking over the Mamluks, if you remember. They came in at 1516, and they crushed the Mamluk and took over. So this is present to people of Damascus and people of the Arab world some kind of a prophecy to say, look, hey, we should actually accept them because they are good people, and they are good Muslims, and they're going to protect Islam, and they're going to look after the sacred sites and now, who is actually interested in this in particular, and this is where it starts to show how important that text is Al-Maqrizi. Now, Al-Maqrizi, Taqiyuddin Al-Maqrizi, died in 1442, right? And Taqiyuddin Al-Maqrizi interested in because the whole construction of that astrological projection was around Cairo, in fact, not around Damascus. It just happened that Ibn Arabi opens with his prediction about his death and about his tomb, but really all the events that he talks about were on Cairo, weren't actually on Damascus, weren't on Syria. So he was predicting what is going to happen with the Ottomans, particularly in Cairo. So Al-Maqrizi was very interested in. Now Al-Maqrizi is not a jurist. He's a very, very competent historian, very reliable source. He is the student of Ibn Khaldun, and he's extremely meticulous. So this guy is not going to actually pick up something that's a hoax, that doesn't actually make any sense. And we're talking about 1442. That is when he's died. So we're talking about 100 years before the Ottoman took over Damascus, which is 1516. So he says, he referring to what that prediction says. He said he referred to the Muhyiddin ibn Arabi, particularly in the Malhama al-Mansuba ilayh. That means this is known as an epic because it has all that kind of big predictions and talking about its history. And he says, وَوَقَفْتُ عَلَى شَرْحٍ لَهَا. He actually saw a commentary on it, but he didn't like the commentary, or he thought that it was actually not very helpful. But he goes on and say, أخبرني غير واحد من الثقات أنه وقف لهذه الملحمة على شرح كبير في مجلدين. That means many people who trust غير واحد من الثقات, very trustworthy people, they told him that they actually saw a big commentary on this text in 2 volumes, right? 2 big volumes. Now, all the texts that I have, which I collected from various libraries, and including the ones that I kept at the Zahiriya library, are not that big. They could be the biggest one is really the Al-Qunawi's commentary, and it is not that big in size. So, so here we are 100 years before the Ottoman takeover. We have historical evidence that this text has been in circulation, has been in commentaries. So even if we concede that it's fabricated, when was it fabricated? It must have been fabricated before Al-Maqrizi actually took hold of it or found it. Now, the interesting things that I've been referring to is the perceptions among the Arabs, the perception of the Turks among the Arab around that time. He writes, this is Al-Maqrizi, and he writes that Al-Mu'izz, who's actually the governor of of Cairo, he was asked about the Turks because the Turks around that time were rising, and the Arabs were becoming aware of their presence. But Al-Mu'izz, who's supposed to be among these sort of Mamluks, who say that those are really Muslim tribes, they enjoin the good deeds, and they forbid the wrongdoing. They adhere to the principles of the Muslims and all the duties, and they fight for the sake of God. So this is actually shows, again, similar to what Ibn Arabi has actually presented in his later on, or early on, I don't know, depending on really when that text was written, is that there is a growing perceptions about the Turks in the Arab world, that those are coming, and those were really good Muslims. And that is why when actually Sultan Salim defeated the disorganized Mamluk army in 1516, he just actually was very peaceful entry. He just walked through Damascus without raising a finger. Let's have a look. That text by Al-Maqrizi raises questions. He didn't actually say what it is, and what's in it. So we know there is a text, but we don't really know what the text looks like and and what's in the text, all the one that I've seen, particularly the commentaries, they vary in the way in what's in them. So this is an interesting text which corresponds particularly with the commentary by Al-Safadi, because he referred to circles, and he said, this is made out of 3 circles. The bigger circles is the Ottoman circles, and then you've got the smaller circles which actually deal with other aspects. So this is the larger circle, and this is 1 page which complete the entire treatise. The one that I have actually is written in a more of sort of a prose, and it is not like a graphic in the way that this. And I've been sort of comparing content. So if I zoom in to the top part, this is the start of the, it says that it's written by Ibn Arabi, and I'm interested particularly in the opening when he referred that when Sultan Salim gets into Damascus or entered Damascus, his tomb will be erased. And this is existing, this one, and existing, particularly this aspect. There's a variations in others, but about this particular aspect of the text, consistent right across. And consistent right across is this particular reference to number, which is butters in there's not a word, it's actually a combination of letters that give predictions of numbers. So if you take that and analyze it according to the numerical value of the letters, you get 2 plus 20 plus 900, 922, 15, 16. That's exactly the date when the Ottoman entered Damascus. And that's when he would say that Sultan Salim will enter during that date. That's the second half of that page. And it is interesting here, it says that that means he completed the text, and it was and was compared with the origin or with the original text. I don't know what the original looks like, but there must be other text which is considered original that looks like this. Anyway, so let's keep going. I think I still have a bit of time. And sort of continue just to quickly to give you a rundown of Sultan Salim entering Damascus and how he actually went about constructing the tomb. This picture is one of the old pictures that shows the building early on in the 20th century before they completely messed it up. Sultan Salim really walked into Syria without any fights, apart from the Mamluk in Marjada, which actually took him long to get rid of them. He came to Damascus, stayed for a few days, and then immediately went to Cairo, to Egypt. He crossed the Sinai desert and got to Cairo in astronomical time. No one would believe that he would actually do that. Killed something like 20 to 25 Mamluks and returned to Syria, installed the governor, and came back to Syria. He entered Damascus on Wednesday, October 7, 1517. All right, that was Wednesday, that was 21st of Ramadan. So he came back in Ramadan, and on Wednesday, and let's look at the itinerary. Then on Wednesday, 7th of October, immediately upon his arrival, after sort of walking all the way from Cairo to Damascus, he met with the governors and all the important people there and commissioned the project. That's on the same day of his arrival, Wednesday. On Saturday, that 3 days later, the site visit was conducted and initial layout was agreed. On Sunday, 11th of October, the adjacent building to the area where the building was supposed to be built was purchased because it was small. They wanted to enlarge it, and supervisor was appointed. On Monday, 12th of October, demolition and site clearance commenced, right? On Sunday, which is 6 days later, construction began. So they cleared the entire site. Remember, they don't actually have bulldozers and caterpillars and all that sort of stuff. They're doing it by hand, right? So, and it is quite a steep site. And so the demolition was complete. The site was cleared in 6 days, and construction began. Probably have half of people of Damascus, doing the work for him. And let me just turn the lights on. And then Tuesday, on the 17th, this is a month later, Sultan Salim ordered the construction of the dome chamber. So because it is made out of 2 three building, in fact, as we will see. But it took a month to construct the main building, and then the dome chamber on the top of the grave was constructed a month later. Then Tuesday night, because the order came on Tuesday to construct that, on Tuesday night they had to dig the foundation, and they deliberately dug the foundation Tuesday night because remember, they're digging the foundation in a cemetery because Ibn Arabi was buried in the Benzaki cemetery. There'll be grave all around him. So if they're out to dig it up in the morning, you'll get people up in arms and crying out, for it's quite a important and sacred thing. So they did it at night. So by the time the people woke up, the foundation were already dug up, and they start laying the foundation. On 24th, that's Christmas, the same year, Muslims celebrated the Adha. So that was quite an interesting coincidence, the Adha and Christmas on the same. 200 sheep and camels. Sultan Salim brought 200 sheep and camels to the Salimiyya, which is the tomb, to be slaughtered in there. Whereas he gave 30 to all the other mosques that are around Sarhiya. Sarhiya is a big suburb which is on the foothill of Qarsiyun, that's sort of overlooking Damascus. It's a large suburb, and there is 250 for Ibn Arabis and 30 for everyone else. So that shows his interest in the whole project. 40 days later, 1st of February 1518, the pulpit was installed because that was being constructed as the building was finished. Friday, this would be 4 days later. Friday, 5th of February, Sultan Salim attended the Friday prayer and celebrated the completions of the complex. Right, and Monday, 8th of February, Sultan Salim left Damascus. That's unbelievable. I mean, when you look at that, you would know that, he is there on a mission. I mean, he wasn't sort of just, doing it as a kind of side activities. And he was there waiting until its completion. So from start to finish, I mean, it's not a big building, but, considering, this is all done manually, from start to finish, the project took less than 4 months. All right, so that's quite a remarkable achievement by Sultan. So Sultan Salim knew of the text and knew of what he wants to do. He knew that this is very important for him. That he knew that he's going to establish a new patron saint for the cities, and knew that this is going to be important for the reputations of the Turks in Damascus. And Damascus is an important, very important city, particularly because of the Hajj, as I said earlier. Because if they lose this, or if there isn't any sort of support from the people in there, it would disrupt a whole process of the pilgrimage. And this was so important for Muslim prior to the modern world, when the new travel means would become available. So, the question is, has this enhanced the Sufi profile of Damascus? I'm not quite sure whether it does, but it did actually. The Ottoman gave Ibn Arabis, and particularly Sufis, a lot of support. The city remained kind of, I would say, sort of divided, not so much divided. Damascus always was kind of plural in the way that you had all the Sufi orders that we know of, that you have people, members of them, but there weren't any eminent figures that play a strong role. The jurists remain dominant until the emergence of Abdul Ghani Nabulsi, who actually, strangely enough, came from a very prominent family. All the family were jurists. There was not a single Sufi in the family, and that goes back to the Crusaders' time, when they were in Jerusalem, and then when the Crusade came, they migrated to Nablus. That's where the name came, and then from Nablus came to Damascus, and they became known as the Nabulusis. They're very, very prominent family. They're all jurists. They're all judges and fuqaha. Jurists. And they're highly respected in the city. He was, in fact, he became the last member of that, you know, a very famous family. And he turned into, you know, as we said, the sort of the second coming of Ibn Arabi, as it were. And he faced a huge resistance, a huge, actually, you know, had a backlash from the people in Damascus. He suffered quite a lot, and that was it. Actually, there was no other person that came from that family became, you know, prominent after An-Nabulsi. So An-Nabulsi was an important figure. This is his actual room. You know, An-Nabulsi goes back to 18th century. It's not a long time ago. And we have his house, the house that he actually constructed his house. He moved. He used to live near the Great Umayyad Mosque. He moved into Salihiyah and particularly moved to be close to Ibn Arabi's, because he is really the reincarnation of Ibn Arabi. So he has to be close to him. And he used to teach Ibn Arabi's material in the Salimiyah. So he built his house, and now it's been all sort of renovated so horribly. And this his house, actually, this his room used to overlook Damascus, because Salihiyah is very high up on the mountain. Now it's all surrounded with ugly buildings. And in fact, with the renovation that they did to the school, there is no access to this room anymore. And I don't really know what exists anymore. You know, I was lucky when I went to visit it. It was still there, but I couldn't get to it. This is where An-Nabulsi used to actually sit and write. So those are the questions. Let's continue on. Here is how one of his students, Hussein bin Qam al-Baytamani, was referring to An-Nabulsi as referring to what Ibn Arabi has said. Now he selected an interesting sort of 2 lines which shows that, you know, Ibn Arabi saying that, you know, we will reappear again at the end of time, and you know, our reappearance would be like the sun, and he would refer to that I am called Abdul Ghani, which is Abdul Ghani Nabulsi's, and so regardless of how, I mean, you know, when I analyze where those came from, he didn't seem to be very meticulous in his interpretation, but nonetheless, it actually give the impression that that this is how people perceived Abdul Ghani during his time. So let's move on to the current state of the buildings, because Al-Nabulsi is important for a number of things. But the most important thing that is relevant for us here, because he wrote an important treatise on the tomb. So that's how the building actually looks like. Last time I was able to it has been really destroyed with the way it's been renovated and extended. So you can see that part of the building added to the building, and this one was also added. The tomb is on the right hand side, and so you can actually see how ugly the things that used to have a double gabled roof. That's all gone. This is also the renovations of Abdul Ghani, which is only about sort of 4 minutes walk from Ibn Arabi's, and it's also been completely destroyed by the by contemporary architectural renovations by the Damascene, who actually completely tasteless and had no idea how to deal with those important buildings. This is the inside of An-Nabulsi. You can actually see it, they turned it into a school. You can actually see the school lockers in the courtyard, and also all the fountains and the for the ablutions, and it was. I look at the air conditioning on top. It was miserable. It was absolutely sad to see what's happened in there. This is the room, which is now completely cut off, and you can't actually get into it. Look at the steel structures, and then anyway. So this is the current situation with the 2 buildings, which were very close to each other. Now let's analyze the building so that we can understand how An-Nabulsi referred to it. We've got the main building in here, the tomb on that side, the water tower, which is a water wheel that brings water up, and also the minarets. So those are the component of the building. if we look at the plan, this is how the plans work. You can actually see right at the left-hand corner, that's the water tower. Because it's a sloping site, you enter from the higher end. So as you enter from, you want water to be raised. There's a river at the lower end, so you want to raise water from the lower end to the higher end. So you've got an aqueduct that goes into there. But you can see when they did the extension, they didn't actually care about the aqueduct. They just actually cut it off. And you can, and the treatise that النابلسي wrote is السر المختفي في ضريح ابن العربي. Here is how the tower, the water tower, is still left over, but they're being cut off. And look at the ingenious solutions that they have come up with. It's a pipe at the end to get the water. You know, there's an aqueduct that goes from the water tower. Now it cuts into the building, but because they've done the extension and they can't get the aqueduct into the mosque. They've done that pipe, which is unbelievable. So anyway, so let's move on.
Yeah, Samir, I hate to interrupt you, but you've got about 2 minutes left. So I wonder if you can sort of speed it up a bit.
So this is from inside. That's the tomb. How you get in? This is the courtyard. They covered the courtyard. They did even more terrible job was the way that they've wrapped it around the minaret. And anyway, so the idea is that Ibn Arabi's, an-Nabulsi, when he wrote it as, you know, part of his inspiration. So what I did is try to reconstruct how the building was based on all the historical evidence and on an-Nabulsi's interpretations. So, and that, I'm going to go fast here so that we can finish. But all those images are really constructed from historical sources, and that's how it actually was, or close to what it was during the time of the Nabulsi. There was a garden at the back. He was talking about the hidden secret in the building, the way that he interpreted in his text. I'm not going to dwell on those. I'm going to just show you the pictures and the things that an-Nabulsi dwelled on the siting, how the building was sited, and how the access, because you have two access, one from the top and one from the bottom, and how you experience the site. And he wrote a really very interesting hermeneutical analysis of how you should interpret, because this building came under criticism from the jurists with the way that the mosque and its relation to the tomb of Ibn Arabi's. So we try to actually show if there was a garden, because he would talk about there was a beautiful garden, but we don't know what it looks like. We just provided a bit of sort of information on this, and he was talking about the mountain and the cave and the heart and the body, and he was sort of showing how you would experience it when you are from the gardens. And, you know, talking about sight and insight. Anyway, look, there is an article. I have an article on this. You can read it, but I have to go quickly so that I finish off. So I tried to sort of show how, according to an-Nabulsi's, you know, show us what the Ibn Arabi's tomb would mean to the people of Damascus. So I thought that was quite important. So that's now is the entrance to there, and he finishes off with a poem. I'll read it quickly. The grave of Muhyiddin is among the most splendid graves. It is fire for the ignorant, life in itself. A mosque up high, and a garden down below, and a river that is among the most beautiful rivers. He is in a presence in between the two, below yet above, in the loftiest palaces. The way to him is through poverty and humility. And this is particularly, he referred to the way that you access the garden. In that approach, and around this all shall revolve. So reflect on what we have granted you of sciences that are like youthful beauties. When inside are healthy, they become like mirrors in which one's intentions loom, but when they darken, every form of life becomes death among people, and that is the end. And that is the end for me as well. So, so thank you for bearing with me. I had to rush through the last bit.